Selection Day, an issue that's still very much in the forefront of not only South Carolinians' minds, but nationally, and that's voter identification. Since 2001, nearly 1,000 bills have been introduced in 46 states, here including, of course, the Palmetto State. The South Carolina voter ID law was passed in 2011 and has since been the topic of many discussions, numerous hearings, and many hours in court for both sides from here to Washington. Joining us this morning to talk about the law itself, South Carolina Attorney General Alan Jackson and from Bamberg County State Representative Bakari Sellers. Gentlemen, good morning.
I'm a fan of Alan Jackson. But,
Did I say Alan Jackson?
Yeah.
Where is that cowboy? I don't know if it might even said Alan Jackson in there. Alan Wilson, AG, sorry about that.
No problem.
Suddenly very hot. From you guys fixing my tie a minute ago to this is just out of control.
We're having fun.
That's right, that's right. Let me ask you this right off the top,
Sure.
Representative. Why are you so opposed to people identifying themselves before they go and pull that lever?
Well, I'm not opposed to that. However, some of the measures that we put in place in the General Assembly, I think, go too far. You know, we fought very hard for the right to vote, and I want to make sure that we do everything we can to expand access to the ballot box, not limit it. Another thing is we've spent over $3 million plus on this bill already, on this piece of legislation already. Right. And for me, that's a heavy price tag when we can be paying for teachers and firefighters and police officers. But I respect the plight of the Attorney General here, and I respect how he's trying to preserve the integrity of the polls. My question is whether or not we've had any breaches in that integrity, and I haven't found the answer to that question to be yes.
Okay, and actually we had a viewer on our Facebook page ask that very question about how many breaches have there been, how many instances of fraud. Attorney General, maybe you have that answer, perhaps not, but is it rampant or is it something that doesn't happen, thankfully, yet, and this is more of a preventative measure?
Well, first off, there are all kinds of election fraud, voter fraud, and this is not a cure-all pill that's going to cure all type of happen. This is impersonation fraud at the polls. It's very difficult to prove something if you don't give poll managers the tool there to detect it. I share a lot of the concerns that Representative Sellers just talked about, and the first being the $3 million that it costs to defend this lawsuit. I wish the federal government had pre-cleared it and then monitored it under the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. Right. But we had to defend the law because, as Attorney General, my client is the state of South Carolina, and they passed a law that had already been upheld under other sections of the Voting Rights Act at the Supreme Court, as well as other federal courts. So we believe that we have balanced the interest of protecting the integrity of the system while looking at the individual right of individual citizens to vote, and we think we have a good balance there.
What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, you know, the courts have spoken, and I'm a true believer in the fundamental cornerstones of our democracy. So with that being said, I do think that the last word will be had at the United States Supreme Court, where you'll have laws like the one in Texas, like the one in South Carolina, which goes a little step further than what they do in Georgia or Indiana. But at the end of the day, it won't be a decision that the Attorney General or I make. It'll be one made by the Supreme Court. And I hope, what I pray for most times is that the division that's been caused by this piece of legislation over the next couple of years, we can kind of mend those fences, and we can not talk about black or white or young or old or rural or urban, or rich or poor, but we can start talking about how to move South Carolina forward. And you know, I'm a little disappointed that piece of legislation took us off that track, but I look forward to the next 2 years where we don't have to talk about this anymore, and we can educate people on how to vote properly, and we can move our state forward.
Take me through briefly the journey. Of course, it got voted in by South Carolina in 2011. Justice Department said, hold the phone, not going to happen. You know, as we talked about, $3 million now in court cases and time and flights and all this. Now you've got a three-panel justices who say it's okay, enacted next year. It was too soon, of course, to make today's election. How does that differ from the original, what folks voted in a year ago, and what it looks like now, what has been approved?
Well, one thing the media has gotten wrong is the law that was passed and signed into law and the one that was upheld by the court are identical, that nothing's changed. When we were up in D.C., Marcy Andino and I spoke to the court. She enforces the implementation of the laws of the Election Commission as Attorney General, and I also have a small role in that. All we did is say we're always going to interpret the law and enforce the law in a light most favorable to the voter. And we told the court that opinions going back as far as the 90s illustrate that the Attorney General's office has always sided on the part of the voter. Right. So that's all we really said, is that we would interpret that law in a light most favorable to the voter. The actual law itself remains intact as it was signed in over a year ago.
Just so your viewers are clear, though, I mean, the law is not in effect today.
Right.
So we want to make sure that everybody goes to the polls today and, you know, take what you need to take to verify your identification, your driver's license, your state-issued identification card, your voter registration card. Take those things to the poll. You know, I firmly believe in this is the only place, the ballot box is the only place where you have something in common with the man who drives the Ferrari. You know, that one man, that one vote, where we're all fundamentally equal. And I will continue every day to expand early voting access, to make sure that we make it easier on our seniors to vote, to make it easier on our military people to vote and college students to vote. And I look forward to working with the Attorney General. I was telling you earlier, I was laughing. I said, between Alan Wilson and Curtis Loftus, I hope this doesn't hurt you in your primary, we actually have two statewide leaders who actually mean what they say and say what they mean and who walk the walk. So I'm actually happy to be able to call Alan a friend and give a shout out to Curtis as well. And good luck to you and your dad today.
Oh, I know.
You're running unopposed, so good luck.
Well, I'm not running.
Guys, we're gonna take a quick break. Come right back with you, and we're gonna talk about some voter fraud and some other stuff as well.
Absolutely.
So stick around. Good Day Columbia is coming right back. All right, guys, 7:55. Welcome back to the show. Still sitting with Representative Bakari Sellers and Attorney General Alan Wilson. Had to slow down and think about that, guys. Just talking about voter ID, of course, and it's great that I guess fundamentally opposed to the same law or different viewpoints on the need for it can sit together, and you really, I think, are along the lines and best interest of South Carolinians, no doubt, on top of your mind. And now you're saying now not a lot of fraud happens here that you've seen, Representative, but you've seen intimidation?
Well, to Attorney General Wilson's point, in South Carolina, we've been voting for a very, very long period of time, and we haven't had one case of a voter identification. Now, we've had different types of fraud and solicitations and things like that at the poll, but we haven't had anybody impersonate a voter. But for the purposes of today and the future, what we want to make sure is that you contact law enforcement. If you see any fraud, I'm sure Attorney General Wilson will tell you, but I've been getting reports of intimidation, people trying to keep people away from the polls, and that's not what we want. We've come too far in this state to turn back now. So I want to make sure if you have any intimidation, I mean, you can call me or call your local representative or the local law enforcement, and let's get to the bottom of that.
Sure. Attorney General, what in the case of fraud, if there is suspected fraud, if somebody, what are the alternatives? What do I have as a voter, as just an average Joe in South Carolina?
Well, first off, everybody is basically arguably a poll watcher. You don't have to be a designated poll watcher to actually have eyes. You have flip phones, camera phones. If you observe something that you think is illegal, such as intimidation or fraud, in either way, or someone's vote being suppressed, you have the ability to report that to the poll manager. If you have trouble with the poll manager, report that to your local Board of Elections, or go to sevotes.org, contact the Election Commission or local law enforcement. And if you can't get through to anyone there, call our office, and we'll help facilitate you getting with the right authority at 803-734-3970. And I want to say one last thing.
Sure.
Representative Sellers and I have become very good friends over the last several years, and he's someone that I just want to give him a shout out that he and I can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's a problem that you have here in Columbia and in D.C. People don't know how to disagree without being disagreeable. So I want to give him a shout out on that.
And if he's dead showing up to your polls, please take a picture of that. We're on the lookout for dead and zombie voters throughout the state. Okay?
Very good. All right, Representative, thanks for coming in. AG, thank you so much for coming in this morning, sharing your views and opinions on
Thank you for having us, Tom.
We'll get some links for you at MidlandsConnect.com as well. So links to the voter fraud and anything else you need to know about right there at MidlandsConnect.com, your place to go for all elections. We're coming right back.